Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan Ennis. This is Ukraine War Frontline update for the 16th. I'm just hanging on to the 16th of March 2024. It's very late here in the UK. It's been a long day of watching rugby, drinking beer and a little bit of wine. And I'm probably ill-advised to be recording this right now. If you're French, feel free not to be part of this particular get-together we're having now. Absolute shocker. No, phenomenal game of rugby to end the Six Nations. 3 phenomenal matches today. Most of you will not care about this. The French just pipped us by 2 points. And, oh my goodness, a lot of shouting was had at the television. And not all of it pleasant. Anyway, the show must go on. So, I clear my voice from shouting. First of all, before we go to the front line, in fact, to the northern border, really, I just want to alert you to what I call Mapgate at the moment. So, as you know, my map consists of 3 sources. Suryat Maps, which is a pro-Russian mapper. Andrew Perpetua, that is essentially a pro-Ukrainian mapper, but is pretty damned objective in my books. And then Deep State Maps, which is pro-Ukrainian mappers. So that's what goes on with my maps. And if you don't know what the lines on my map mean, please check out the key on the screen at the moment. Pause the video. Right, so over the last 24 hours, there's been another spat between Andrew Perpetua and Suryat Maps that ended in this. Well, it hasn't ended. It's still ongoing with other threads and whatnot. But Andrew had to go back at Suryat Maps that called him out. Tried to call Andrew out. Said, "Hey man, I'm curious. Do you still use Garaman as a primary source, or did you develop some dignity?" Ouch. Also, just FYI, we have been diligently tracking all the mistakes you make, all the things you erase without telling people. Every single one. Every single one. We will release it when the time is ready, when it amuses us the most. Not only the errors you make, but the sources that you make the error, that made you make the error. And let's just say the trends are very funny, very revealing, very unprofessional on your part, to be honest, honestly embarrassing. But that is for another day. Enjoy. And so on and so forth. So, goodness me. Andrew keeps a lot of databases, and he evidently has a database of Suryat Maps' claims and erroneous claims and whatnot. But nonetheless, I mean, I love using 3 different sources to get an idea of where the reality lies. And I think it is useful for you. And I do try and say what are the weak points and strong points of the mappers as they do their thing. Right, okay, that aside. What is going on north of the border in the Kursk Oblast and Belgorod Oblast? The answer to that question is I don't really know still. There are so many claims still hanging around. This is one such claim from the Freedom of Russia, I think, Legion. They deny Russian claims that they've been wiped out, and post this video showing the smouldering ruin of a school in Rezhivka, 10 kilometers from the border. Presumably Russia thinks that the rebels are hiding there. And yeah, this unit is claiming that Russians are shelling their own schools. Just lots of stuff like that. Belgorod was very active today. The city of Belgorod, that is. There were warnings that there was going to be large-scale Free Russian army attacks on Belgorod and surrounding areas, and there were air raids and explosions. So I don't really know what is going on and what has happened. It's just that it's been pretty, I think, chaotic along the border. Lots happening. Andrew Perpetua, as a pro-Ukrainian, has been absolutely damning of these attacks. Does not think they're worthwhile at all, and thinks they're a massive waste of equipment and effort and human lives. I will not be so bold as to make those, fairly far-reaching claims. I don't know really. Is the answer, because I don't really know what's going on, what they've lost, and what they've taken out of the Russians. What I said previously, I think this morning, I was talking about how some of their successes are unmeasurable, because I think it's more to do with the timing. It's the election weekend and the days leading up to the election. That's why they're doing this, and it is, you can't measure the success in terms of how it affects Russian morale, what it does to the idea of the what it does to the news or to social media platforms where people are reporting these activities and spreading these activities. I just don't know how effective the activities have been. So I guess, when the dust settles, we'll be able to get a better idea. But there seems to still be activity going on. I'm just not exactly sure where right now. Okay, as you can see from the northeastern sector, very quiet, or at least there's no mapping changes all the way down to Avdiivka, really. So Bakhmut, no changes. Terny, Torsk, no changes. Kupiansk, and everywhere in between, Zaporizhia and whatnot. When we go to the Institute for the Study of War, American military think tank, no significant details coming out of that northeastern sector. Indeed, coming down to Bakhmut, positional fighting continues. So nothing to report from there. So that is another day of no movement in Ivaniska, for example. So this small settlement just to the west of Bakhmut. Bodanivka, very key, and Ivaniska, key to maintaining that buffer zone around Chaziv Yar to the east of Chaziv Yar. So I think it's incredibly significant that must be 5 days of no movement in Ivanivska and Klishchivka as well. And it's interesting listening to Andrew Perpetua's live stream that they found a whole load of Russian destroyed vehicles as a result of a random video to do with women serving in the armed forces. And in the background, they could see all this destroyed Russian equipment that had happened previously, and they're like, "Oh, we didn't even know that." And it was just really interesting to listen to the conversation about that, where they said, "Like, how many of these sorts of videos exist out there? How many destroyed bits of equipment do we not know?" So when Andrew releases that list of lost equipment that I share with you every single day, how many other pieces are still out there unknown about? And this happens quite often. They suddenly find a whole haul of equipment and add that to the databases. But yeah, apparently around Klishchivka, there's another just haul of equipment that the Russians have lost over time. And yeah, but no changes there. No changes between Avdiivka and Bakhmut. But as we come to Avdiivka, you can see that there are some changes. Andrew Perpetua and Deep State Map seeing that in the Badichi area, the Russians control a bit more of that village. And then further to the south, Deep State Map between Orlivka and Badichi has some Russian gains. Andrew Perpetua not yet confident with that change. It's interesting talking about what's going on here. There was an attack all the way up this road by the Russians, and I think they got all the way over here, and that's probably why Syriac Maps has that in red. And again, this is, if you're going to go to these criticisms that Andrew has, and I would level the same criticism of Syriac Maps, they always move the Russian defensive lines up to any point where the Russians have shown their presence in terms of there's a vehicle that's been here. It may have been blown up, and there may be no Russians in that area right now, but that's Russian control because there was a vehicle there, they attacked there, and so on and so forth. And in fact, that's exactly what's happened here. So Andrew's talking about an attack that went along this road. A load of stuff, I think, was destroyed here. A load of stuff was destroyed here, and eventually one BMP or similar got this far and then got blown up, dropped off the people. It might be an APC actually, dropped off the people and then got blown up, and everyone I think got destroyed by a Bradley that came down and shot them up here. But that has Surat Maps calling this now controlled by the Russians, but it's not. It's an attack that was failed and they got defeated. So this would be grey zone. And actually, Andrew did say, well, look, they got this far, and to get that far means that the Ukrainians can't realistically be in control of Badichi. So this is just most probably a big grey zone. The Russians control it. I'd agree with Andrew here, given that evidence, that the Russians control good half of Badichi, and the rest will be grey zone, and the Ukrainians are staying somewhere back here, and then coming down to attack the Russians to repel the Russians if they attack, and then pulling back. But what I like about Andrew is we get those live streams and we hear the rationale behind his decisions or their decisions to do the mapping as it's done, and I think that's really useful for us. Whereas Surreal Maps is just like, yeah, there's a change here, and then sometimes some commentary to go alongside with it. But it's more like the Russians have done this, and it's yeah. I think Andrew's going to be a lot more objective, really, in terms of how he does his mapping. Right. Moving on to the south, Tonenke, some activity there. Deep State Maps has some gains for the Russians in Tonenke. And indeed, the Institute for the Study of War says a little bit there. Geolocated footage published on March 15th shows that's yesterday, that Russian armoured column recently advanced west of Tonenke. And additional geolocated footage published on March 16th shows elements of the Russian motorized rifle brigade 110th advancing into and raising a flag in Nevelske. Okay, we'll take the first one first, which is Tonenke. Unpleasant situation for the Russians here. So again, this is like, yeah, they're advancing, like they're literally moving forward, but then they get hammered, and then does it mean that they control that area? So if you go to Tonenke again, we've got Surat Maps having much greater control for the Russians than the other mappers, and I'd suggest that it's exactly the same sort of thing happening there. So we've got destroyed BMPs. Does it mean that the Russians control this area? No. Does it have the Russians been there? Yes. Have they been blown up there? Yes. So exactly what we'd expect, and this is what gives, I think, Surat Maps the rationale to change the mapping to suggest. But it just always seems that it's a grey zone. That this evidence that Surat Maps uses to change to advance Russian control is actually just evidence of that being a grey zone, and I would claim that's the case here. Now, what then often happens is the Russians do eventually take that, maybe some days later, and then Surat Maps or their followers, his followers, go, "Oh, he's really accurate mapper. Look, he's always ahead of the game." But he's not ahead of the game. Actually, he rushes to make these decisions, and quite often you have situations that are fully erroneous, and they've been like that for like 3 weeks, and he might walk it back with not the full admission that he got it wrong initially, but with some other crap excuse. But nonetheless, useful to keep that as a source on my maps, even though I understand, and hopefully you guys understand, some of the weaknesses in each of the mappers. So Andrew here, much more conservative, but when those moves take place, you are definitely sure that has happened. I think we just got better justification in believing what Andrew says. Okay, so yeah, Nevelske then, which is this small agricultural settlement to the south of Pervomysky. So you've got the Avdiivka, what was the Avdiivka salient, now it's sort of a straight line. You've got Pervomysky, where the Russians have been continually taking chunks out of Ukrainian control. Indeed, I think this whole area here is probably a grey zone, and Ukrainians control any of that, and probably really Ukrainian controls back here. And then Nevelske, there is apparently the footage of the liberation of Nevelske by soldiers of the 110th Brigade. The video speeded up due to Twitter limit, and then Russian assault through fire on Nevelske. So that's on March 11th, though. But this is these are the videos that Institute for the Study of War use as geolocated rationale for the Russians controlling Nevelske and raising a flag there. But not everyone agrees with that, as you can see from the other mappers. So, pinch of salt. And this is clearly a Russian source. You can tell that because of the spelling of Nevelske. Anyway, going back to the ISW, a prominent Russian mill blogger claimed that an armoured Russian group advanced west of Tonenke, as we've heard, and reached the outskirts of Semenivka, but did not advance further. So just to come back up to Tonenke here, and that is I think this must be that second settlement. It's not rendering, probably because there's a line near it there. Oh no, that's Semenivka. So that's actually, yeah, it's a bit weird because that's not really connected to Tonenke. That's more Olivka and up near Badici. So I'm not sure why ISW has said advance west of Tonenke and reach the outskirts of Semenivka. Uh, that might be just two not very good grammar there. It's two completely separate things going on. Anyway, so the Russians could have advanced to the west there. But just going to read you what the ISW says in general about Avdiivka. So a Ukrainian battalion commander operating near Avdiivka stated yesterday that the Russian forces near there are innovating and changing classical Wagner-style infantry-led meat assaults with assaults using armoured vehicles to increase and maintain constant pressure on Ukrainian forces. The Ukrainian commander stated that Russian forces are attacking with multiple divisions, likely referring to elements of divisions that are unlikely to be staffed and equipped at full end strength, and that Russian forces aim to achieve a 10-1 numerical advantage over Ukrainian forces in the Avdiivka direction. So we've heard recently from certain official sources that the Russians are still trying to get their breakthroughs there. There are different claims about whether the Russians are culminated, whether they are running out of momentum and reserves. There are then claims that Russia are getting ready for a big late spring, summer offensive, and this could just be precursors to a coming offensive. I'm not sure that they'll be in a position to do that. Anyway, the commander stated that Ukrainian forces have slowed the Russian advance but cannot say confidently that the situation is stable. A Russian mill blogger claimed that Ukrainian counterattacks near Avdiivka have lost momentum and suggested that Ukrainian forces either lack reserves or are withdrawing to lines further back, though ISW has not observed any confirmation of these claims. A prominent Russian mill blogger claimed that Ukrainian forces recovered quickly enough following the fall of Avdiivka and asserted that Ukrainian forces achieved numerical superiority in the Avdiivka direction. However, ISW is unable to confirm this claim, as the tactical situation west of Avdiivka remains dynamic. In other words, various things being claimed by various sides. My general intuition is that the Russians are pretty much culminating in most of the areas, like, for example, Bakhmut, Avdiivka. They're certainly finding it much more difficult to grind out territorial gains moving to the west, and I think Ukrainians have brought in reserves and do have enough artillery ammunition to hold those lines at least somewhat at the moment. So yeah, interesting that there are no changes to Mariinka or Novomykhailivka, although Novomykhailivka is looking very much like it's on the way out for the Ukrainians. The Russians are advancing there, and Konstantinivka must be in their sights. This is all very worrying still for me, even though I think the Russians are struggling because they've lost an awful lot of equipment, particularly around Novomykhailivka. This is something that they desperately want. Andrew is talking about how in Vodyane the Ukrainians have some air defense systems, and not necessarily in it, but in this general area, electronic warfare, all that kind of stuff, and it gives them there's higher ground around there that gives them the ability to use that effectively. And if the Ukrainians lose all of this ground, then they'll have to push that further back, which means that, they'll have less coverage around this whole area. So it's important they hold on to this. I think it does have operational significance here, and that's why it's a bit of a worry that I think the Russians are having that success around Novomykhailivka. I don't know why the map suddenly did that, but it did. Just a bit of fun for you. So anyway, dynamics still around here, but no changes today to the mapping, so that's good news there. Then we have some Ukrainian gains, as according to Syriac maps here, to the east of Uruzhany. My personal opinion would be not so much gains as, well, it could be actually. It could be just this tree line here that the Ukrainians have taken back, but then it doesn't really align with the other mappers, and could well be that it's an omission that they were overzealous initially. And that there's now evidence that the Ukrainians are in those positions. Or it's normally something like there is video footage of Russians hitting trenches with either bombs, artillery, or FPV drones. And in order for the Russians to hit that, that means the Ukrainians are in control of those areas, and changes then come about. So if we go to the Institute for the Study of War, positional fighting in the Mykhailivka area, geolocated footage published yesterday shows that Russian forces advanced in the Priyutne area, and that's what we showed yesterday. Both the mappers agreed that that the Russians had advanced around there, so that's mentioned in the ISW. And then we come on down to Robotyne. Now, Andrew Perpetua has some Russian gains here for the area just to the northwest of Verbove. We do have Surat Maps also claiming some gains there too, but I think that's maybe mapped out yesterday. It's from 7 o'clock last night, so maybe no pins on that because we did that yesterday. But anyway, Surat Maps claims that Russian armies continue advancing northwest of Verbove and the Surovikin line. So there's still some disagreement here as to who controls that Surovikin line there. Indeed, that could be. I think that is a change. That might have happened. Actually, that looks like the Russians. Surat Maps is claiming the Russians control that. So I think that's been mapped since JR did the mapping today. So expect to see that tomorrow. That area is filled in according to Surat Maps. But yeah, not too much else to report in that area. The ISW says it's just positional there. And then we come to Krinky, where we've not really heard much for some time. Listening to what Andrew Perpetua said on his live stream, the Russians had taken their foot off the gas here, while I think they sort of reconstituted or whatnot. Well, they are, I think, starting to pick up again to the northeast here in pushing the Ukrainians again. The ISW says positional engagements continued in the east or on the left bank of the Dnipro. Including near Krinky on March the 16th. A Russian mill blogger claimed that Ukrainian forces also maintained positions near the Antonivsky Bridge, but did not specify whether he was referring to the Antonivsky Railway Bridge or the roadway bridge. So that's interesting because we haven't heard of the Ukrainians active here for a long time. There's a railway bridge there and the road bridge just here, both of them destroyed, much closer to Kherson. And the Ukrainians were in control of this area, but we just haven't heard a lot from there for a long time. So that's a Russian claiming that the Ukrainians might well still be active either there or there. But yes, I don't know whether the Russians are amassing for a larger push on the Ukrainians here. It has been a bit of an equipment graveyard for the Russians, that Krinky area. Anyway, that's enough from me. That's your frontline update for the 16th, 17th of March. Please like, subscribe and share. Really appreciate all your support. Take care and I'll speak to you soon. I'm planning on having a live stream tomorrow night with Greg Terry and Professor Gerdis, where we are going to do a bit of a fundraiser. JR is going to do a bit of a match the donation thing as he did with the drones. So it's really generous of JR. We're pushing for funding for these armoured medical vehicles coming from the UK. Yeah, really, really pleased to be on board with that. And I hope you guys can help out as we do a bit of a Q&A tomorrow night. Talk about what's been going on in general terms. I'll probably do the mapping update then or something. It'll be a bit of everything, but it'll be woven in throughout that will be fundraising for those who have the ability and wherewithal and desire to do that. Anyway, as I say, speak to you fairly soon. Toodle pips.